Board game rules. Good God, man. What are they good for? In my last vlog, I talked about putting together a tutorial for the others. I wanted to build a video that would teach people how to play the game, but wouldn't portray the game as being boring or overcomplicate things for them. In the process of working on that, I've hit kind of a roadblock because generally for most people, it's not an exciting prospect to sit down and read a new rule book and figure out how to play a game. Obviously, I'm familiar with rules. I've been playing these games for decades at this point. The general player doesn't want to sit there and look through the book, or that new person you're trying to interest in playing these games doesn't really want to sit there for 30 minutes of tutorial before they can sit down and play this game that could take anywhere from 30 minutes up to, 3 hours, depending on what you're playing. So for me, that's a problem. When I sit down to play a new game and I'm teaching to my family or my friends, it's often a struggle to have to teach them new stuff because I don't want to bore them and overcomplicate things for them.
You have all these rules and you think they'll save you.
I'd prefer to follow the same rule that you would if you're writing a story. It's better to show how it works instead of tell how it works. So I honestly feel, from my past experience, that a better way to teach people how to play games is to actually play the game with them, and you teach them as you go. Now, if you have your more competitive players, they're going to have a problem with this because that first time playthrough, if they don't win and somebody else wins, they're going to feel cheated because they didn't know how to play. That first playthrough is like that tutorial level in a video game. You're just walking through how these things work, how this piece moves here and the interactions that are happening. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think more board game manuals should advocate that type of play. When you sit down to play a role-playing game, you don't dish out the entire summary of how to play that game to your players when you're bringing them into it. The DM ingests those rules and helps to guide the players along as you go. And the players learn how these rules and interactions come to pass and how they affect their character and the story that's happening around them. They test their limits and you set things up for them and you help guide them along the way. But you're not like just force feeding them pages of rules before they can sit down with their new character that they just, may have spent 30 minutes to an hour to 2 hours, depending on how complicated the system is, creating. So the last thing you would want to do is just jam a bunch of rules down their throat for the next hour after that, telling them this is how I play the game. Generally, you're like, okay, we're going to roll up a character. Tell me what type of character you want to play. Let's roll these dice. We'll pick our stats. These stats do these type of things. They'll give you these benefits, which will allow you to do this. And you're explaining this as you're doing it. And they'll tell you, well, I want to be this type of thing. I want to be sneaky, and I like this race. The elves sound cool. I want to play a sneaky elf. So you're like, all right, you're going to play rogue elf. Assign points like that. These are your benefits, your bonuses. You just give them a basic idea how things are going to interact. And then as you play, you start to present more of the rules that are going to govern the movement of the game. When you sit down to play a board game, generally you don't have that type of luxury. You got to sit down and you got to go through first the game setup, how you're supposed to set everything up on the table before you can even start play. After you've done that, then you've got to establish this is how things work in a round, and then these rounds have turns, and this is how things work in a turn, and then this is the end game condition. If this is hit, the game's over. It becomes so complicated for players their first couple times playing that they're going to need like a cheat sheet to break down the overview of how to play. When you're playing a role-playing game, that's generally the DM's job. You'll be sitting there with the screen with the data points on the back for references on how to play, what interactions happen, the charts that they need to roll against, that type of stuff. That would be the DM's job to keep track of. In a larger game, there may be an assistant DM or a helpful player that's helping the others who are learning the game too. Board games in general don't give you that option. They don't give you the ability to allow people to kind of walk into the game, sit down, and you teach them as they're progressing. Because there are all these rules and interactions that are happening, especially in the competitive ones, that if they falter, they're going to lose the game and possibly feel cheated. Not all players are like that, of course. Some players just play to enjoy the game and hang out with their friends and do things. But then, you've got the people who are there to compete, and they like that competitiveness, the one-upmanship and so forth. That's fine. Wherever you have your fun, have it. Just don't have it at the expense of others, obviously. I think board games progressing forward would benefit more with that type of let's walk into it and play. Almost like these legacy games that have come out, which I talked about last time. If you look at a legacy game, there's an interesting thing happening that gets you into the game pretty quick. They give you the most simplistic version of the game, and you play through that for your first round, or your first game. And then the next game, things become more complex, And that complexity helps expand the game experience. But it's also introducing these new rules that for generally a different game that wasn't a legacy game would have already had at the start. So it gives your players a chance to build up into this game, which is great. And that's more, I guess, of what I'm looking for there. That if more board games gave you those step-up options, and they're like, okay, we're going to start with this base complexity. It's just the basics of the game. This is how you move. This is how you interact. This is the scoring. You finish that game session. You unlock a new thing in the next mission, and now you can do this, that, and then if these things happen, then this gets summoned in, or this happens. You just add more complexity to the game. Some dungeon crawlers kind of do that. They introduce you to the basics of the crawl, and then the next mission they up the ante and make it slightly more complicated. But I think the legacy systems, the legacy games that we've seen so far, that's where that idea really comes across and could shine and show other games how to borrow back from that and make them better. Obviously, this is all my opinions. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who enjoy reading rule books, enjoy teaching people, and probably there's people who sit there and enjoy learning. There's people who probably sit there and enjoy watching the videos on YouTube or wherever else they're being taught. When I sit down to watch one of these videos on YouTube, I find myself just skipping around to find the chunks and pieces that I'm looking for rules to be elaborated on, because unfortunately the rule book did a terrible job of relating the actual definition of something. And that happens in role-playing too. That's why they have erratas. It's just frustrating to sit there and watch one of these videos, or have to sit there for 30 minutes while somebody teaches me how to play this game before I can even jump into it. I'm showing up as the player. I want to get into the game. I want to start. But now I've got to take a class. It's 30 minutes, but still, it's 30 minutes we could have been playing at this point. We could have been learning for 30 minutes how to play the game by actually doing it, which would be a more fun experience than sitting there and listening to you talk to me or me watching this video. If the video, I don't know, I'm trying to figure out how's that video going to become more engaging, more entertaining for the person watching it. Sure, I could recite the rule book and clarify rules. It bores the crap out of me, and is that honestly what I'm here for? I don't feel like it is. Then that's why I'm sitting here talking about this right now. I guess my takeaways from it are, they might be a good idea for board game instruction to take more of inspiration from role-playing games and the way they get players into them, and also these legacy games, borrowing back from them the way they've borrowed from other games to establish the whole legacy system of building components on top of each other to introduce these systems. You could use that for instructional purposes to get people into the game. And thinking on that, I know that there's a game that pops to mind recently that I read a rule book for. It was Legends of Andor. They're the quick start guide. They've got an easy play option. This gets players into the game quicker by introducing a base set of rules to get them started on how to play the game. That's a good idea, and I feel like a lot of other board games would benefit from that option. Perhaps designers and publishers would be worried that introducing people to this basic version of their game would become boring. Maybe you just start it off as the basic, and as they play through the turns, more mechanisms more systems get introduced, conducting their rounds till they get to the end game. Just establishing and moving in a momentum that's teaching them, engaging them, and entertaining them, which instruction manuals severely lack, and so do tutorial videos. There's not much engagement happening, very little entertainment. I mean, you might see some flavor text in a board game manual that would pull you into the theme, possibly. I know when you're playing role-playing games, there's a lot of flavor text happening while you're walking through things, plus a lot of examples on how these systems interact. I do want to get this tutorial done because I think it would be helpful to clarify rules and get people promptly into the game, but I just don't want it to be this boring, droning on, this lecture.
In an effort to alleviate the effects of the... Anyone?
I've sat through enough of these instructional videos in corporate America that I don't want to contribute to that in the board game sphere as well. I hope I can sort some of these ideas out and possibly introduce my own version of a tutorial that may be slightly more entertaining. I don't know how engaging it can be as it's a video and it's not like a live content type thing. I'll work on it and see what I can come up with. If anything, it'll keep me thinking, which that's always good. So those are my thoughts. I'm interested to see what anyone else has to say on this. I know my wife disagrees with wanting flavor text and manuals to make them more interesting. She'd rather just get into the grit of what the instructions are especially if she's going to have to teach other people. Though she said if she wasn't teaching other people, she would enjoy the flavor text. And she preferred that the flavor text is stored on separate other pages, like the thematic elements shouldn't interfere with the rules for her. So I'm interested to see what other opinions are out there as far as that goes. If you've got something you'd like to share, please do so in the comments below. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. I'd like to give a shout out to MZ. They sent me this awesome t-shirt here. You can find this social media site at imzy.com. I'll put a link below for it. It's a pretty cool alternative to like Reddit and some of these other social media sites. Oh, and don't forget, if you're not a subscriber, click that subscribe button. I appreciate it. Have a great one.